This is Mark Farrar with Not Square Design, LLC, here in Montana. The contact information is right here if you need to get a hold of me for design services. Let's get into it. We'll come back into some of these stills later on, but what we're looking at is changes in how the roof design will work. So I'm going to run you through a quick 3D view and describe some of the stuff, and then we'll look at different variations of the design, and that way you can make decisions on how you'd like to proceed. So I'm working on some entry ideas here, and I've got some sketches drawn out that I'll overlay to show what I'm doing here. But I wanted to be able to kind of look at this in 3D to understand how the roof would work. So basically this slope will change down to like a 3 and 12 and come back in, which allows me to drop the ridge, as the ridge would come to this point. As you can see, we're much lower over here. I could even see if I can split that ridge, which means it would come up off of here, which would hit way down at this point. So if we look up at that, that's cutting this much down in material on roofing and stuff. Um, and then this roof would come and it would just barely overhang on this end. And then from wherever that height ends up being, I'll run a shed roof at a 312 pitch back out to create the overhang for the porch. So it'd be shallower. And you'll see in the images that I attached to this, the stills that I've created, it'll give a good idea how that works. Now, one of the things that we end up with is if I'm looking at this roof here, I'd like to bring it down and then mirror a column over to this side, which would be kind of half buried into the wall, but it'll give a symmetrical look, bring this beam look across, but we'd actually close off the gable. And I'll show you how that looks in the stills as well. That creates a valley in here, so I need to put a cricket in here to create drainage out this point. Now what it's doing is it's getting rid of that valley that we had here, which I've never liked, how it drained right here at the step. So all the snow from this roof was coming down and landing in this area. Now I know that you guys mainly are going to come in through your garage, but it would just require additional maintenance that if I can get a roof like this in here, would really change the way that the snow falls in this area. And we can actually even then work on, oops, it's not what I wanted. I had the wrong tool chosen. Let's get that to go away. But then I would take and reduce this concrete work down. So we still have a nice wide entryway, but it would need to be as wide as it was. So it'd be something more along these lines, as to how that will work. So that combined with the still images that I'm going to show you, there is also some wood variant that I've got in here, and that's putting wood railing on the front of the house. And I really like the way it looks. Now, for the back of the house, I'd like to keep that steel cable railing because this is your view side where we're looking out over the entire city, not a lake. But in the stills, I've got background images in there that are more realistic. But in the 3D, without a spherical image, it's a hard thing to do. So, just want to show how this is working and some of the changes that we could do to really enhance the way this looks. So I'm going to combine this into a video with some still images with some sketches on them and get your overall thought on how this would work. So just keep in mind that this whole roof would lower substantially. Does mean I've got to redo some work in framing and stuff, so it would set us back a little bit in time. But better drainage, lower material costs if I can reduce this ridge substantially. So I could save some money, and that money could go into doing things like adding the cool wood railing on this end, and pay for this roof and the gable that would go through here. So let me get those images all assembled, and then I'll get your feedback on what you think as far as how it looks. So before I get into some of these variations, I wanted to describe what we're looking at here. And so you can see I've got the gable shown with the different colored tan and brown lines, and that gable would be out at that beam's depth, which we may not need a beam in that case, because we'd be running the roof the other direction. The horizontal tan line over to the note new shed is where we would change the pitch just over the porch to a 3 and 12. Then the ridge, I just kind of use some light blue to blacken, to fade it out to show that it would get lower. I think it'll actually be even lower than what I've shown there. And then as far as the column on the left that's sketched in there, that would be to create a symmetrical look around the entranceway. And then between those two roofs where we get that valley, we'll need to install a cricket. Now, as we look at the south end of the building, the gray and the tan lines that are shown with the new entry gable is the side view of how that gable roof would look. And then the red, probably a little hard to read, but it says shed cut back, and so we'd be cutting back where the two X's. I'm just basically saying we wouldn't bring it all the way out to that full depth. It can be cut back to basically almost a flush with the wall. And then there's a note below that to show that we could do wood variation on the wood surround, which I'll give some what that looks like. There's a new window down below, which was per the request that you had made recently. And then there's a rough estimate on kind of a middle ground of where the ridge would shift down to. And then that brown you see is just me filling in where the old ridge was. And then I just use some white to color in to make it disappear. So this is about where the heights and stuff would end up at, or close to. And we'd get into more on specifics, and I could probably even get it lower than what we're showing there, which could turn out to be substantial savings in the gable end cost, the roofing costs, and that would pay for the more decorative entrance. So this first clip is just showing how the model was coming together in chief without any real changes to the design other than me working on the entrance over the roof and adding the cricket, moving that post over. So I'd still need to narrow up the walkway into the entrance. So these next couple of shots are just alternating back and forth between 3 different frames, showing the original, then 2 columns, and then a wider 2 columns. If you wanted to see that, you can obviously rewind and capture going through that again if you didn't catch it in that short time frame. And this view shows 3 columns with it's close to a Dutch gable roof. So we could use a Dutch gable if you don't want to do a full gable. And here we've got a full gable, but using some corbels up in the peaks or the ridges, and then there's a crow's nest up top. And if you can see, there's also copper valleys, the addition of copper downspouts to go with kind of the copper accent of the crow's nest up above. Absolutely decorative, not necessary for the design. And then this is going back to a much simpler look where there's just two columns, and I don't like this one as much myself, but again, we're back looking at a Dutch gable design, and the columns are off center, and so I don't know if that's usually in the when I've brought things off center, it hasn't been something that you guys like that much. So you seem to appreciate symmetry as a stronger architectural feature. And in this view, what I'm looking at is the addition of the wood railing, which I really like the heavier timber look, and I think this kind of goes along with some of the original thoughts when we first started the design of getting a little more of a northern appeal. And this is probably my favorite of all of the versions that I've got going on at this time. And then I've got a little closer view, a zoomed in view of the same thing. Oh, I did want to address something here. So we've had this discussion that's gone back and forth a little bit on how this is going to work. So I haven't finished out the trim up here to make it match because I don't know how the windows are going to work. So if we're doing this wood veneer around this base, then the issue is that if we trim the windows all the way down, I could have the rock come out and we could just not trim this portion right in here. And that would be on both sides. Because the thing is that when we get to the interior, you've said that you wanted these windows to come all the way down. So it's kind of one of two decisions. One is bring the windows up to above the stone. That's the simplest solution to the whole problem. But if you want to have the full height, then I think we should consider putting stone in this area through here. And that would be a little bit of a trick to get it to render that way, but it's not necessary to actually have it render that way. We'll just get it, keep moving forward is the goal. So I would simply put the stone up in here on the AutoCAD drawings for the contractors, and we'd leave this like this, and I can provide some special instructions and some hand drawings to explain what we really want to have done. And then you'll see in some of the variations, there's some tapered columns, or we can go with the standard 8x8s for cost savings in case you don't want to pay to taper the columns. Hopefully what I've created here for you has provided some useful information, and we can make some good solid design decisions from some of the stuff that I've shown you here. So please review it and get back to me when you have a chance. Thank you. This is Mark with Not Square Design.